I welcome you to this event this afternoon. And of course, you know that the Bell Curve, the book by that name, which has roots in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is very much in the news. There are two speakers this afternoon. I will introduce them very, very briefly so that they can maximize the time of their presentations. And I will announce them together. One will follow the other as I have announced them. The first is Professor Winston Van Horne, who is from the Department of Africology here at UWM. And the second is Professor Walter Farrell from Educational Policy and Community Studies, also here at UWM. These two gentlemen are very, very well known, and I'm sure you've seen them here and there and yonder, and they need no further introduction. And what they have to say, I assure you, will buttress what I have just said. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I picked up the paper for Monday, and I would come closer, but I guess it's being taped, so I should stay here. The headline reads, "Race has no scientific basis in biology, researchers say." This is Monday, February 20, 1995, and it says, "There is no biological reality to the concept of race," C. Loring Brace, a University of Michigan anthropologist, said Sunday. "Race is a result of the human tendency to categorize, but it has no biological basis." Now, 54 years ago, this 2.5 generations, UNESCO published this book, Race and Science, and I'll simply read you 2 sentences from L.C. Dunn's chapter, Race and Biology. Dunn, incidentally, was a biologist. "The judgment of biology in this case is clear and unequivocal. The modern view of race, founded upon the known facts and theories of heredity, leaves the old views of fixed and absolute biological differences among the races of man, and the hierarchy of superior and inferior races founded upon this old view without scientific justification. Biologists now agree that all men everywhere belong to a single species, Homo sapiens. We must rediscover fire every 100 years. My presentation is entitled, "The Bell Curve, a Tradition of Racialism." Tradition is a wellspring of human life. From it issues forth sentiments, beliefs, customs, mores, and norms that are handed down by speech, writing, and other sufficient sign from generation to generation. Long-established ways of thinking and or acting grounded in tradition, which shapes the contours of conscious and unconscious, as well as rational and irrational behaviors. Tradition also shapes, these behaviors rather also shapes traditions. In tradition inhere the best and worst of the thought and conduct of Homo sapiens sapiens, and through it guideposts of acceptability and pathways of permissibility are made known, whereby individuals are inclined to behave in ways that make them better or worse when judged against standards of human decency. A tradition that has drawn determinate contours of life in the United States with searing social effect is racism. The conscious and unconscious, rational and irrational impulses that radiate from this tradition are a commonplace in the everyday life of the society and find expression in articulate conceptual discourse no less than inarticulate discursive diatribe. Richard J. Herrnstein's and Charles Murray's The Bell Curve is masked behind articulate conceptual discourse, though steeped in an all too familiar racialist tradition. Before discussing the bell curve directly, it is well to arc back to the mid-16th century when Englishmen first made contact with Africans in order to provide an historical context for the racialist tradition that envelops the book. In his now classic work, The White Man's Burden, Winthrop D. Jordan observed that Englishmen found the peoples of Africa very different from themselves. Negroes looked different to Englishmen. Their religion was un-Christian. Their manner of living was anything but English. They all seemed to be a particular libidinous sort of people. It is proper to note here that in their initial contact with Africans, Englishmen observed that Africans were not without religion. It was just that the form and substance of the Africans' religion differed from Christianity with which Englishmen were familiar. I should like to stress the term familiar. At the very outset of their interactions with Africans, Englishmen imputed to the unfamiliar countenance and behaviors of Africans all sorts of wretchedness out of their own myopia, ignorance, arrogance, lack of understanding, and cultural chauvinism. Many an European has, to this very day, mindlessly imitated the British in this regard. Still, it was color that most engaged Englishmen in relation to Africans. Jordan notes that for Englishmen, the most arresting characteristic of the newly discovered African was his color. Travelers rarely failed to comment upon it. Indeed, when describing Africans, they frequently began with complexion and then moved on to dress, or as they saw it, the lack of it, and manners. What was it about the African's complexion that so arrested Englishmen? Its blackness. Jordan writes that Englishmen actually described Negroes as black. Given the powerful impact that the black color of Africans had upon Englishmen, it is fitting and proper to ask, what were the cultural cognates of the term black into which Englishmen were socialized? Again, Jordan is helpful. He observes, no other color except white conveyed so much emotional meaning. As described by the Oxford English Dictionary, the meaning of black before the 16th century included deeply stained and dirty, soiled, foul, having dark and deadly purposes, malignant, pertaining to death, deadly, baneful, disastrous, sinister, and so on and so forth. Jordan continues, embedded in the concept of blackness was its direct opposite, whiteness. No other color so clearly implied opposition. White and black connoted purity and filthiness, virginity and sin, virtue and baseness, beauty and ugliness, beneficence and evil, God and the devil. Whiteness, moreover, carried a special significance for Elizabethan Englishmen. It was, particularly when complemented by red, the color of perfect human beauty, especially female beauty. By contrast, the Negro was ugly by reason of his black color and the horrid curls and disfigured lips and nose. I have cited Jordan at some length because his observations afford critical insights into the rise of a racialist tradition in colonial America, the United States. Given its British origins, the dominance of the English in colonial America, and the powerful emotive charge attached to color in the psyches of Englishmen, it was empirically inescapable that color would come to permeate the culture of American society. Insofar as the English conflated color and race in relation to themselves and Africans, Chief Justice Roger Taney simply expressed with stark forthrightness sentiments pertaining to racial superiority and inferiority carried transgenerationally in the culture when he wrote in the infamous Dred Scott decision that neither the Declaration of Independence nor the Constitution embraced the African in the United States, regardless of whether she was enslaved or free. Moreover, said Taney, blacks had for more than a century before been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations, and so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. This opinion was at that time fixed and universal in the civilized portion of the white race. It was regarded as an axiom in morals as well as in politics. Note, an axiom in morals as well as in politics, which no one thought of disputing or supposed to be open to dispute. There are those who have quarreled with Taney's observation concerning the axiomatic assumption of moral and political inferiority in relation to black people, still, no less an intractable foe of slavery than Harriet Beecher Stowe of Uncle Tom's Cabin fame, believed that though slavery was morally wrong, a hard boundary of demarcation along the color line would continually separate blacks and whites, with blacks being the social inferiors of whites. And Abraham Lincoln, in the first of 7 truly historic debates with Stephen Douglas between August 21 and October 15, 1858, one of the seminal events in the decade prior to the Civil War, Lincoln observed, "I will say here that I have no purpose to introduce political and social equality between the white and black races. There is a physical difference, emphasis, a physical difference between the two, which in my judgment will probably forever, emphasis forever, forbid their living together upon the footing of perfect equality. And I, as well as Judge Douglas, am in favor of the race to which I belong, having the superior position. I agree with Judge Douglas that the blacks are not my equal in many respects, certainly not in color, perhaps not in moral or intellectual endowment." In the third debate, Lincoln reinforces the aforementioned points by observing, "There is a physical difference between the white and black races which I believe will forever forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. And inasmuch as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, there must be the position of superior and inferior. And I, as much as any other," and I insert white man because that's the only thing, the only adjective that fits there, "I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race." And meeting with a group of black men at the White House after he had become president, in case one thinks that Lincoln had changed his views on this matter, Lincoln said, "You and we are different races. We have between us a broader difference than exists between almost any other two races. Whether it is right or wrong, I need not discuss. But this physical difference is a great disadvantage to both of us. On this broad continent, not a single man of your race is made the equal of a single man of ours. I cannot alter it if I would. It is a fact. It is better for both of us, therefore, to be separated." What is the empirical fact that Lincoln perceives himself unable to alter? The social, political, moral, and intellectual inferiority of blacks, which emanate from a physical difference grounded in color.